A huge shout out to Terrence795, our very first subscriber. Welcome to the Guard Legacy family. Here, the laughs are loud, the vibes are high, and our crew is growing every single day. With awesome people like you, things just keep getting better and more fun. Our tea is brewed hot beverage. Your apple pies are ready, so hit that subscribe button, join the fun, and let's share some laughs together in the chat. And don't forget to ring that bell, because missing out on the fun is not an option here. Come on in, let's grow the happiest, warmest family on YouTube, together. Emma Watson didn't walk up to Buckingham Palace. She arrived. Not in a blacked-out SUV or a horse-drawn carriage, no. She rolled in on a pastel green electric scooter named Gloria. The scooter had a solar panel, 2 wicker side baskets, and a bumper sticker that read, "My other ride is social justice." She pulled up right in front of the palace gates, executing a graceful little turn and stopping with ballet-level precision just inches from the perfectly polished boots of the royal guards. Her tweed jumpsuit was wrinkle-free. Her vintage Gryffindor scarf flapped gently in the breeze. Her hair, somehow, looked like it had been styled by a woodland nymph with a PhD in sustainability. Emma removed her eco-friendly helmet and let her gaze drift up to the 3 guards, standing there like monuments to British emotional constipation. She nodded at them slowly, like a therapist acknowledging a client's resistance. She didn't say hello. She just reached into her tote bag, hand-woven from recycled Margaret Thatcher biographies, and pulled out a foldable lace-covered table. Without a single word, she set it up in front of them. Then came the vegan finger sandwiches, the fair trade teacups, and the cucumber water with sprigs of lavender. She arranged them all with meticulous grace, as if she were casting a spell with pastries. The final touch, a hand-lettered sign that she propped delicately on the front of the table. It read, "Sparkles Tea with Feelings. Free emotional support for royal figures suffering from generational stoicism Sparkles." A few tourists gasped. One American teenager whispered, "Bro, is this like performance art or something?" A French woman muttered, "Elle est une sorcière. Mais une bonne sorcière." Emma sat down, poured herself a cup of steaming rooibos. Then she looked up and began to speak, not loudly, not forcefully, but with the gentle authority of someone who once yelled at Ron Weasley about trolls in bathrooms. "Do you ever get tired," she asked the middle guard, "of pretending, of hiding behind that fuzzy hat? That big ol' stoic exterior? Don't you ever just want a hug?" "Nothing." Emma nodded solemnly. "That's okay. I didn't expect you to answer. Silence is a trauma response, after all." She took a bite of a triangle-cut sandwich and chewed with dramatic elegance. "I know what it's like to carry the weight of expectations. I once cried during a UNICEF speech because the microphone didn't smell cruelty-free." The left guard's nostrils flared. Emma locked eyes with him. "That's right," she whispered. "I saw that. Micro-emotion. We're getting somewhere." The wind picked up. Her scarf fluttered. A bird above the palace let out a long, melancholic chirp, as if it, too, had a complicated relationship with masculinity. Emma reached into her bag again and retrieved a small wooden box. Inside were 3 personalized tea sachets. Repressed trauma chai. Let it out lemon balm. Cry like it's 1812 chamomile. She placed one in front of each guard with reverence. The moment was silent. Holy, almost. The kind of silence that deserves a slow-motion montage and an instrumental Coldplay song in the background. Still, the guards remained motionless. But then, a bee entered the scene. A single ambitious bumblebee landed on the brim of the middle guard's hat and began to buzz about aimlessly. The guard did not move. But he looked up. A subtle shift of the pupils. A twitch in the corner of his lip. Emma gasped as if she had just caught Voldemort crying at a poetry slam. "Yes." She stood. She pointed dramatically. He acknowledged the bee. That's presence. That's vulnerability. That's growth. Someone in the crowd burst into applause. A corgi barked in agreement. The guard blinked once. A flinch, a spasm, a tear. The crowd would argue about it for years to come. Emma smiled gently. "I've done what I came to do." She gathered her tea set, folded her lace-covered table, and slipped a small envelope into the middle guard's breast pocket. It was sealed with wax and smelled faintly of bergamot and accountability. Its contents? A voucher for one free therapy session and a playlist titled, "Feel Your Feelings, Gregory." She turned, stepped onto her scooter, and kicked off into the mist. Her scarf waved like a banner of revolution. And just before she vanished from sight, she turned her head ever so slightly and said, "I'll be back. And next time, I'm bringing Audre Lorde." The guards said nothing. But something had shifted. The air. Their posture. The very vibe. And if you listened closely, very closely, you could almost hear one of them whisper, "Thank you, Hermione." The next morning, the London fog hung low and thick, cloaking Buckingham Palace in an almost mystical veil. The usual crowds had gathered, murmuring excitedly and whispering theories about the mysterious woman who had appeared the day before, setting up tea service and challenging the seemingly impenetrable stoicism of the royal guards. The three guards, whom Emma had secretly named Lefty, Blinky, and Gregory, stood as statues once more. Their posture was impeccable, their expressions as unreadable as a Mona Lisa painted by a grumpy artist on a Monday morning. Yet, beneath their disciplined exteriors, subtle changes were brewing. Micro-expressions, brief twitches, even a hesitant glance here and there. The seed Emma had planted was beginning to take root. Emma herself arrived not on her usual pastel-green scooter, but this time astride a charming Victorian tricycle, its wheels gleaming in the soft morning light. The tricycle was adorned with eco-friendly decals, and a small wooden box was strapped to the back, filled with carefully selected items she intended to use for her ongoing campaign of emotional liberation. She dismounted with the poise of a dancer and immediately began her ritual. A Persian rug, deep blues and gold swirling in intricate patterns, was unfurled with care on the cobblestone, creating a sacred circle of softness amidst the hard stone. A lavender-scented candle was lit, filling the air with calming notes that seemed to soften even the hardest hearts. Nearby, a speaker quietly emitted a mixture of gentle rain sounds and carefully curated spoken-word poetry, excerpts from Toni Morrison's most stirring works blending seamlessly with lines from Maya Angelou and even a subtle nod to Beyoncé's anthem of empowerment. The crowd hushed. Phones were lowered. Even the pigeons, those typical London natives, ceased their usual chatter, as if paying respect to this strange and beautiful ceremony. Emma took up a vintage chrome microphone, its weight solid and reassuring in her hands. Her eyes locked on Gregory, the middle guard who had shown the faintest glimmer of vulnerability the day before. With a breath steady but full of passion, she began. "You stand there, a sentinel of tradition, a monument of duty, but beneath the crimson lies a soul waiting, longing to be free." A subtle twitch at Gregory's jaw, a shift in Blinky's stance, and then, almost impossibly, Lefty blinked, a full, human blink. Emma's voice softened, her words wrapping around the guards like a warm shawl. "Feelings are not chains to bind you, but windows to your truth. The cracks where light seeps in. Proof that you are alive." The gathered tourists were visibly moved. A young woman dabbed tears from her cheek, an elderly gentleman nodded solemnly. The square felt transformed, no longer just a royal guard post, but a sanctuary of human emotion. Emma stepped forward and knelt, placing a single black feather at Gregory's feet. The feather was a symbol of transformation, freedom, and the delicate beauty of vulnerability. Gregory's gaze fell to the feather. Time seemed to pause. Then, almost imperceptibly, his rigid posture softened. Emma smiled, a smile of quiet triumph and hope. "I will return tomorrow," she whispered, gathering her things. "And next time, bring your heart." Soft applause rippled through the crowd. From within the palace, a corgi barked twice, an unmistakable sign of royal approval. Emma mounted her tricycle and pedaled away, her scarf trailing behind her like a banner of gentle revolution. The guards resumed their statuesque stance, but the air around them felt altered. A crack had formed in their stoicism, a stirring beneath the bearskin hats. If you listened closely, you might have heard Gregory mutter under his breath, "Maybe it's time to try chamomile." The morning sun struggled to peek through London's trademark fog as Buckingham Palace stood proud and imposing, The kind of building that had seen centuries of history unfold, secrets whispered, and of course, an uncountable number of stiff upper lips. But today was different. Today, the air buzzed, not with royal protocol, but with the scent of freshly baked biscuits, herbal teas, and the promise of emotional upheaval. The three royal guards, Gregory, Lefty, and Blinky, as Emma had affectionately dubbed them, were stationed at their usual posts, but something was off. Gregory's jaw twitched more than usual, Lefty's eyes darted nervously towards the bustling crowd, and Blinky was actually blinking like a normal human, which was practically revolutionary. Emma Watson arrived like a force of nature, rolling a small wooden cart painted in bold purple and sprinkled with delicate floral patterns that seemed to shout, "Feelings welcome here." The cart was loaded to the brim with a colorful assortment of teas, some soothing lavender blends, others punchy Earl Greys, as well as trays of biscuits baked fresh that very morning from a local bakery famous for its soul-soothing recipes. She set the cart down with a theatrical flair, pulled out a hand-lettered sign, and hung it carefully. Emotional support tea and biscuits, free for the stiff and stoic. A small crowd had gathered, buzzing with anticipation and curiosity. Cameras were out, social media notifications at the ready, and an elderly gentleman in a bowler hat muttered something about the decline of the monarchy, while secretly snapping a photo. Emma wasted no time. She arranged the biscuits, golden, crumbly, flecked with lavender petals and bits of honeycomb, with the care of an artist presenting a masterpiece. Then, balancing a steaming teapot in one hand and a tray in the other, she approached the guards. Gregory stood perfectly still, his gaze fixed on some distant point only he could see. Emma placed the tray in front of him and offered a biscuit. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Gregory's eyes flicked to hers. He murmured, the word barely audible. Emma smiled. "It's okay. You can try." He hesitated, lifted the biscuit, and took a small bite. The crowd held their breath. Gregory chewed thoughtfully, then, astonishingly, exhaled a soft, relieved sigh. It was subtle, but it was there. "Not bad," he admitted, his voice a touch less wooden than usual. Encouraged, Emma turned to Blinky, who was now openly fidgeting. "Want one?" she asked, holding out the tray. Blinky blinked rapidly and took a biscuit, nearly dropping it in surprise. Lefty, who'd been watching quietly, reached out and accepted a biscuit with surprising delicacy. A crumb escaped and landed on his pristine red jacket. Emma laughed softly. "That's the spirit." She poured tea into delicate porcelain cups etched with tiny roses and set them before each guard. Gregory's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his cup, raising it to his lips with a tentative grace. Emma leaned in and whispered, "See? Feelings can taste delicious." The crowd erupted into soft applause, some chanting, "Feel the feels! Feel the feels!" A young tourist, inspired by the moment, asked Gregory, "Would you like to join us for tea sometime?" Gregory blinked, really blinked this time, and looked at Emma. Then, for the first time, he nodded. The crowd gasped. Phones zoomed in. Social media would explode. Emma raised her cup in a silent toast. To small victories, crumb by crumb. Behind them, the palace corgis barked happily, tails wagging as if endorsing this revolution of the heart. Gregory's stoic mask cracked further, a warmth spreading where only frost had lived before. Meanwhile, Blinky quietly muttered under his breath, "Maybe I'll try chamomile next." Emma smiled, knowing that today had been a victory, not just for biscuits and tea, but for the slow thawing of centuries-old armor. The sun was climbing higher, burning away the last wisps of morning fog around Buckingham Palace. A typical London day, if typical meant an unexpected emotional revolution unfolding amid centuries-old tradition. Emma Watson arrived. No scooter this time. Instead, she sauntered up wearing a soft pink scarf that fluttered with every step, a cheeky nod to the possibility that even royal guards might someday dare a splash of color. Her tote bag jingled with the sound of carefully selected self-help books, a few scented candles, and a discreet Bluetooth speaker loaded with carefully curated playlists. Part classical, part Beyoncé, part meditation chants. The guards were already in position. Gregory was looking slightly less rigid, his eyes catching her scarf with what could only be described as confused admiration. Lefty cleared his throat, a sound Emma was pretty sure he hadn't made in years. And Blinky? Well, Blinky seemed to be trying hard not to smile. Emma pulled a folded chart from her tote and held it up like a professor unveiling her syllabus. "Today," she announced to the gathered crowd and the guards alike, "we tackle the hardest uniform of all, the emotional dress code." She explained that while the iconic red coats and bearskin hats were symbols of tradition and duty, they often masked the very human feelings bubbling underneath. "And feelings," she added, "are not weaknesses, they're the most colorful accessories you can wear." The crowd chuckled. A toddler nearby tried to mimic Emma's gestures and promptly tripped, eliciting a collective "ah" from the audience. Emma rolled out a small rack of scarves, pastel shades, patterned silks, and cozy knits, all draped with a touch of theatrical flair. "These," she said, "are your new badges of honor. Your permission to feel. Your license to express." Gregory shifted his weight, eyes darting between the scarves and Emma. Blinky eyed a lavender one, and Lefty, surprisingly, reached out and brushed a soft peach scarf. Emma helped him wrap it gently around his neck. "See? Doesn't that feel better already?" A murmur ran through the crowd. Someone took a photo, someone else whispered, "Iconic." Then, Emma began a playful fashion show. Each guard took a turn parading their new scarves, their stiff movements slowly loosening into something approaching grace. Gregory, who had been the most hesitant, smiled, a genuine, if brief, smile. Emma narrated their emotional wardrobe, with a mix of wit and warmth. "Gregory here rocks the melancholy mauve, perfect for those days when you want to brood but still look fabulous. Blinky's got the sassafras silk, because sometimes you need to say no without saying it aloud. And Lefty? Oh, Lefty's owning the peach perception, soft, sweet, and utterly unbreakable." A few tourists joined in, clapping and cheering. Phones recorded every moment. Twitter hashtags were born. As the scarves fluttered in the gentle breeze, Emma spoke softly. "Tradition is important, yes. But so is evolution. So is the courage to feel, to express, and to change." The guards stood a little taller, their postures more relaxed. Something had shifted, like the first cracks in an ancient fortress wall. Then, in a moment that caught everyone off guard, Gregory's scarf slipped slightly, revealing a faint smile as he caught Emma's eye. Emma winked. "See? Even a little color can change the world." From behind the palace gates, a corgi barked twice, wagging its tail as if approving the new look. The crowd erupted in cheers. Emma gathered her scarves, folding them with care, and prepared to leave. But before she did, she handed Gregory a small mirror. "Look at yourself," she said. "See not just a guard, but a man who's allowed to feel." Gregory glanced into the mirror. For a brief moment, vulnerability flickered in his eyes. Emma smiled. "Tomorrow, we add music." She stepped away, scarf trailing like a banner of gentle revolution. Behind her, the guards resumed their posts, but the air was warmer, lighter, full of possibility. And if you listened very closely, you could swear Gregory hummed a tune, a soft, almost inaudible melody that promised new beginnings. London woke slowly beneath a heavy quilt of gray clouds, the kind of morning that smelled of damp stone and old secrets. Buckingham Palace, ever grand and immovable, stood like a monolith of history, its gates locked tight against the bustling city. But on this particular morning, the ancient walls were about to witness something unexpected, the beginning of a revolution, not one of swords or crowns, but of feelings and sound. Emma Watson stepped lightly onto the palace grounds, a beacon of warmth amid the chill. Gone were the pastel scooters and Victorian tricycles. Today she carried a small Bluetooth speaker, black and sleek, cradled in her hands like a rare jewel. Her lavender sweater was soft and inviting, sleeves pushed up to reveal nimble wrists, jeans rolled just so, and a confident smile that promised magic. The crowd gathered with hushed anticipation, a sea of eager faces clutching smartphones, ready to document history. The three royal guards, Gregory, Lefty, and Blinky, stood at their posts, statuesque in their crimson coats and towering bearskin hats. Yet beneath their stoic exteriors, subtle changes whispered. Gregory's shoulders sagged a fraction less, Blinky's blinking slowed, Lefty's eyes twinkled with the faintest hint of mischief. Emma knelt to place the speaker on the cobblestones, carefully positioning it a respectful inch from Gregory's polished boots. She pulled out her phone and with practiced fingers cued a playlist titled simply, "Break the Silence." The first notes, soft and deliberate, spilled into the air, a blend of gentle classical strings, soulful jazz, and faint undertones of Beyoncé's Halo. The music was a carefully crafted potion, meant to coax open hearts and loosen iron-clad wills. Emma stepped back, her gaze steady and warm as she addressed the guards. "Sound," she said softly, "is the language of the soul. It carries our joys, our fears, and everything in between. It's the bridge from silence to connection." The melody floated around them, filling the square like a tender embrace. Gregory's boot tapped, a slow, uncertain rhythm. It was the tiniest sign, but it echoed like thunder to Emma's ears. Blinky's head nodded ever so slightly, almost imperceptible, as if he were trying to catch a secret beat only he could hear. Lefty closed his eyes briefly, and for the first time in memory, a smile ghosted across his lips. Then, the impossible happened. Gregory's hand twitched, a small movement that broke the years of discipline holding him rigid. His fingers flexed, rising slowly in time with the music, hesitant but determined. The crowd gasped, the sound rippling like a wave. Blinky chuckled, a soft, genuine sound that surprised him more than anyone. He joined Gregory in the tentative sway, moving in sync, a fragile dance of awakening. Lefty, the most reserved, took a step forward, nodding his head with newfound rhythm. Emma's smile broadened, radiant and victorious. "This," she whispered, "is not just music. It's liberation." The sound swelled, and others joined. Guards stationed at nearby posts tapped boots, cracked smiles, and hummed along. Tourists clapped, some dancing shyly in place. Emma pulled a tambourine from her bag, its jingles sparkling in the muted light. She shook it gently, inviting the guards to join. Gregory laughed, a full, joyous laugh that echoed off the palace walls. Blinky grinned, shedding his stiffness like a second skin. Lefty's eyes glistened, a warmth spreading from deep within his chest. Emma's voice rose above the music. "This is your permission. To feel. To express. To be alive." The crowd erupted in cheers, phones flashing as history was made. Behind the gates, the palace corgis barked, their tails wagging in harmony. Gregory turned to Emma, eyes shining with gratitude and hope. "Thank you," he said simply. Emma nodded, knowing the hardest silence had been broken. The afternoon sun spilled gold over Buckingham Palace, setting the stones aglow with a warm hue that seemed almost magical against the backdrop of London's famously grey skies. The palace square, usually a sea of silent statues and disciplined stillness, now pulsed with an energy that was part excitement, part nervous anticipation, and wholly unprecedented. Emma Watson stepped into this new world with a playful smile and a determined sparkle in her eyes. Today was the grand finale in her quiet crusade to awaken the human hearts beneath those iconic red coats and towering bearskin hats. She had come prepared, a small leather satchel full of whimsical tokens of emotional courage, and a heart brimming with hope. As she walked toward the trio of guards, Gregory, Blinky, and Lefty, who were now standing a bit less rigidly, their eyes brighter and their expressions softer, a small crowd of tourists, palace staff, and curious onlookers gathered behind velvet ropes. Word had spread quickly about Emma's unusual daily visits and the slow but undeniable thawing of royal stoicism. With dramatic flair, Emma pulled from her satchel a collection of enamel pins, tiny badges shimmering with bright colors and witty phrases. Feelings are fashion, emotion commotion, hats off to vulnerability, and crack the stoic code. She held them up like gleaming trophies, her voice ringing clear and joyous. "Today," she declared to the captivated crowd, "we crown your feelings. We decorate your courage. We celebrate the fact that beneath these hats beat real hearts, not just tradition." Gregory's usually impassive face twitched with amusement. A faint but unmistakable smile began to play at the corners of his mouth. The crowd responded with an approving murmur, the atmosphere thick with a sense of something historic unfolding. Emma stepped forward and pinned the first badge onto Gregory's uniform, just above the sharp crease of his chest pocket. The "feelings are fashion" pin caught the sunlight, flashing like a beacon. Gregory's eyes widened for a moment before settling into a warm gaze. Next came Blinky, who adjusted his bearskin hat with newfound confidence before receiving the emotion-commotion pin. His smirk deepened, revealing a gleam of rebellious joy. Lefty, ever the quiet one, chuckled softly as Emma secured the "hats off to vulnerability" badge to his jacket, the delicate pastel colors a stark but welcome contrast against the deep red fabric. The crowd clapped and cheered, some even wiping away tears as the ceremony of emotional emancipation unfolded. Tourists raised their phones, capturing every detail for the growing avalanche of social media shares. Emma then turned to Gregory, placing the final and most delicate pin, a heart-shaped emblem, right over his heart. With a deep breath, Gregory stepped forward for the first time that day, breaking the wall of silence that had defined his existence. "I never thought," he began, voice thick with an emotion that made his usual stoicism seem miles away. "I never thought I could feel this much, and still stand tall." The crowd was silent, hanging on his every word. Blinky nodded, stepping beside Gregory with a grin. "It's liberating," he said with a wink. "Like finally breathing after holding your breath for centuries." Lefty, smiling broadly now, added, "And it's kind of nice, being allowed to be more than just a statue." Emma's smile was radiant as she pulled out a small, ornate mirror from her satchel. "Look at yourselves," she said softly, handing it to Gregory first. One by one, the guards peered into the mirror, seeing not just the crisp uniforms and towering hats but faces alive with feeling, eyes that sparkled with vulnerability, lips curved in genuine smiles, and hearts exposed and proud. Then, in a moment that surprised everyone, including Emma, Gregory slowly removed his bearskin hat, holding it gently as if it were a fragile relic. With a slight bow, he placed the towering hat on Emma's head. The crowd erupted into laughter and applause. Emma, balancing the oversized hat with mock solemnity, declared, "This hat is no longer a symbol of stiffness, it's a badge of bravery, transformation, and the power of feeling." At that moment, from behind the palace gates, the royal corgis burst into a chorus of enthusiastic barking, their little tails wagging in joyful approval. Emma turned to the guards, her voice full of warmth. "Today, we've rewritten tradition, one feeling at a time." The sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow over the square. The air was alive with possibility and change. And if you listened closely, the palace walls themselves seemed to whisper, "The guards have awakened." As the golden hues of the London evening softened into twilight, Buckingham Palace seemed to exhale, a gentle release from centuries of solemnity and silence. The great stone walls, the stately windows, the towering gates, all bathed in a soft lavender-pink glow, stood witness to a transformation that was as delicate as it was profound. Emma Watson returned, this time with the confident ease of someone on a mission. In her hands, she carried a vintage silver tea set, a carefully curated treasure she'd borrowed from a nearby historic mansion known for its grand afternoon teas. The teapot gleamed like liquid mercury under the fading sun, and the delicate china cups and saucers seemed almost ahum with anticipation. Her goal was simple yet ambitious, to crown this unprecedented emotional revolution with the quintessential British tradition of tea, a ceremony of warmth, connection, and, as Emma was about to prove, unexpected hilarity. Gregory, Blinky, and Lefty stood waiting, their once impenetrable postures softened by the day's previous breakthroughs. Gone was the rigid stoicism that had defined them for centuries. In its place was a lightness in their eyes, a spark of vulnerability, and, perhaps most surprising of all, a glimmer of excitement. Emma set up a small wooden table near the palace gates, arranging the tea set with the precision of a curator unveiling a masterpiece. The rich aroma of Earl Grey soon filled the air, mingling with the cool London breeze and the faint scent of blooming jasmine from the nearby gardens. Tourists, palace staff, and curious onlookers gathered at a respectful distance, drawn in by the tantalizing scent and the promise of witnessing something extraordinary. Phones were at the ready, lenses pointed, hearts open. Emma poured the first cup with practiced grace and handed it to Gregory, who took it with an eager, almost reverent smile. "May I?" he asked softly. "Please," Emma replied. Gregory raised the cup, the steam curling around his face like a gentle halo. He took a delicate sip and then, to everyone's astonishment, exhaled with a contented sigh. "Delightful," he declared, the word sounding foreign and wonderful on his lips. Blinky, never one to be left behind, reached for a biscuit from the silver tray, his eyes sparkling with mischief. With a playful grin, he offered one to Lefty. Lefty accepted the biscuit with a twinkle in his eye, and a crunch that seemed to echo louder than expected in the quiet courtyard. "I never knew biscuits could taste like this," Lefty admitted, his voice warm and tinged with genuine surprise. Emma laughed, her heart swelling with joy at this simple but profound moment of connection. "It's not just the biscuits," she said warmly. "It's the company." At that moment, a rustle of fur disrupted the serene scene. The royal corgis, those ever-watchful palace guardians with wagging tails and mischievous eyes, had evidently decided to stage a covert operation. They darted between the legs of the crowd, stealthily stealing biscuits from the tray and causing gentle chaos. One particularly bold corgi lunged at Gregory's coat, tugging playfully at the fabric. Gregory chuckled, a deep, genuine sound that surprised even himself. He bent down and scratched behind the corgi's ears. All right, Gregory said with mock defeat. "You win this round." Emma watched, her eyes twinkling as the barriers between tradition and spontaneity dissolved into laughter and warmth. As twilight deepened, Emma queued up a playlist blending classic British anthems with modern uplifting tunes. The crowd, caught up in the infectious spirit, began singing softly along. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, Gregory, Blinky, and Lefty exchanged glances, an unspoken agreement passing between them. In unison, they broke into a synchronized tap dance, a delightfully awkward yet utterly charming performance that sent the crowd into fits of laughter and thunderous applause. Emma joined in, spinning beneath the fading light, the oversized bearskin hat bobbing comically on her head. The palace, the